The massive Federation battlecruiser Nexus Prime drifted through the cold darkness of space. Its hull stretched for miles, covered in armor plating that could withstand the blast of a small star. Inside the ship, thousands of alien beings from across the galaxy worked together, or at least tried to. Today would test just how well they could cooperate. Commander Jake Morrison walked down the long metal corridor toward the briefing room. His boots made sharp sounds against the floor with each step. At 42 years old, Jake had seen more combat than most soldiers could imagine. His face showed the marks of 20 years as a Navy SEAL. Small scars crossed his jaw from shrapnel. His eyes held the steady look of a man who had faced death many times and walked away. Behind him followed his team. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez checked her equipment one more time. She was the best demolitions expert Earth had produced in the last decade. Her small hands could build a bomb from spare parts or defuse one with seconds to spare. Next to her walked Sergeant Kevin Bailey, tall and thin like a blade. His sniper rifle was slung across his back. Kevin could put a bullet through a target from 2 miles away in a sandstorm. The 3 humans made their way through crowds of alien beings. Some walked on 2 legs like humans. Others crawled on multiple limbs or floated through the air using technology Jake could not understand. The aliens stared at the humans as they passed. Some looks showed curiosity. Others showed something that looked like disgust. Jake had gotten used to the stares over the past 3 years. When Earth joined the Galactic Federation, many species questioned whether humans belonged. They called humans weak, primitive, too violent for civilized space. Jake had heard it all before. What bothered him was not the insults, but the waste. Earth had fought wars for thousands of years. Humans knew combat better than any species in the galaxy. Yet the Federation treated them like children playing with toy guns. The briefing room doors slid open with a soft hiss. Jake stepped inside and felt the temperature drop. The room was huge, big enough to hold 500 beings. Rows of seats faced a central platform where holographic displays showed star maps and battle plans. Already, dozens of alien species filled the seats. Their conversations created a buzz of strange sounds, clicks, and electronic signals. Admiral Patricia Cross stood near the front of the room. She was Earth's highest-ranking officer in Federation space, a woman who had spent her entire career building bridges between humans and aliens. Her gray hair was pulled back in a tight bun. Her uniform was perfect, every medal and ribbon in its proper place. She nodded to Jake as he entered. "Commander Morrison," she said quietly, "ready for this?" Jake looked around the room. Near the center sat a group of insectoid beings called the Vexstar. Their black shells gleamed under the lights. They communicated through pheromones that made the air around them smell like rotting fruit. To their left, energy beings called the Luminari flickered in and out of solid form. They looked like living lightning trapped in roughly human shapes, but it was the group near the front that caught Jake's attention. 7 beings sat together, each one massive and covered in what looked like living armor. Their scales changed, color from green to brown as they moved. These were Saurians, and they were trouble. The largest Saurian stood nearly 8 feet tall. Crystalline armor plates had been surgically attached to his natural scales, making him look like a walking tank. His name was HFY, and he commanded respect from every alien species in the Federation except one. He had made it clear from the moment humans joined that he considered them beneath notice. Admiral Cross called the room to order. The various alien conversations died away as she began to speak. Today marks the beginning of the first joint training exercise between Federation forces and Earth's military units, she announced. Her voice carried clearly through the room's speakers, translated instantly into hundreds of languages and communication methods. The purpose of this exercise is to evaluate how different species can work together in combat situations. Each group will demonstrate their capabilities and then participate in combined operations. HFY stood up from his seat. When he spoke, his voice sounded like rocks grinding together. "Admiral Cross, with respect, why are we wasting time with this exercise? The humans have been part of the Federation for only 3 years. They have no advanced technology. Their bodies are weak. They cannot even breathe in most environments without artificial assistance. Several alien species made sounds that Jake recognized as agreement. His jaw tightened, but he remained silent. Admiral Cross had warned him that this might happen. Commander HFY, Admiral Cross replied carefully, Earth's military forces have extensive combat experience. They have been fighting wars for thousands of years. Fighting each other with primitive weapons, HFY said with what sounded like laughter. We have conquered entire star systems. We have brought peace to dozens of worlds through superior strength and tactics. What can these mammals possibly teach us? Jake felt Amy tense beside him. Kevin's hand moved slightly toward his sidearm before stopping. They were waiting for his signal, ready to respond to any threat. But Jake had learned patience through years of dangerous missions. He knew when to act and when to wait. The briefing continued with detailed presentations from each species. The Vexstar showed recordings of their hive mind tactics, where thousands of soldiers moved as one organism. The Luminari demonstrated their ability to phase through solid matter, appearing and disappearing like ghosts. The Cyborg Collective displayed their mechanical enhancements. Bodies more machine than organic tissue. Each presentation drew applause and respectful comments from the other species. When Admiral Cross called for Earth's demonstration, the room fell silent. Jake stood and walked to the central platform. The holographic display showed Earth's military history, battles fought across continents and in space around the solar system. Images flashed by showing human soldiers in every environment, from burning deserts to frozen mountains to the vacuum of space. Earth's military doctrine is based on adaptability, Jake began. His voice was steady, confident. Human soldiers learn to fight in any environment, against any enemy, with whatever weapons are available. We do not rely on superior technology or natural armor. We rely on training, teamwork, and the refusal to surrender. More images appeared. Humans fighting in close combat with knives and bare hands. Snipers taking impossible shots across vast distances. Small teams of soldiers defeating much larger forces through clever tactics and determination. HFY made a sound like snorting. Impressive propaganda, he said loudly enough for everyone to hear. But propaganda does not win real battles. When faced with truly superior forces, these humans would break and run like all weak creatures. The room buzzed with conversation. Some aliens seemed to agree with HFY. Others appeared more thoughtful, studying the images of human warfare with new interest. Admiral Cross stepped forward. The purpose of tomorrow's exercise will be to test these theories in controlled combat simulations. Each species will face challenges designed to test their strengths and expose their weaknesses. As the briefing ended, Jake gathered his team and prepared to leave. They had taken only a few steps toward the door when HFY's voice boomed across the room. Commander Morrison, the alien called out. I look forward to seeing how your weak species performs when faced with real warriors. Perhaps this exercise will finally prove to the Federation that humans do not belong among civilized species. Jake stopped walking. He turned slowly to look at the massive alien warrior. The room had gone quiet again, everyone waiting to see how the human would respond to such a direct challenge. We'll be ready, Jake said simply. His voice carried no anger, no fear, just quiet confidence. See you tomorrow. As they left the briefing room, Amy spoke quietly. That guy's going to be trouble. Kevin nodded. Big trouble. Did you see the way the other species looked at us? Half of them think we're jokes. Jake was quiet for a moment. As they walked back toward their quarters, finally he spoke. Let them think what they want. Tomorrow they'll learn something about humans that the Federation hasn't figured out yet. What's that? Amy asked. Jake's expression was grim. We're not the strongest or the fastest. But we're the most dangerous thing in this galaxy, and we prove it every time someone decides to test us. The combat simulation chamber was bigger than 3 football fields put together. Its walls stretched up so high that Jake could barely see the ceiling in the dim light. The floor was covered with a strange material that could change shape and texture. based on whatever training scenario was running. Right now it looked like rough concrete, but Jake knew it could become anything from sand to ice to metal grating in seconds. Hundreds of alien beings filled the observation decks that ringed the chamber. They had come to watch the joint training exercise, curious to see how the different species would perform. Jake could feel their eyes on him as he checked his equipment one final time. His assault rifle was loaded with simulation rounds that would register hits without causing real damage. His combat knife hung at his side, along with grenades that would produce light and sound instead of explosions. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez crouched nearby, running diagnostics on her demo charges. The small devices would create holographic explosions during the exercise, allowing her to practice her demolitions work without actually blowing holes in the ship. Her dark hair was pulled back under her helmet, and her face showed the focused concentration Jake had seen hundreds of times before missions. Sergeant Kevin Bailey lay flat on his stomach 20 feet away, looking through the scope of his sniper rifle. He was checking sight lines and calculating distances, preparing for whatever scenarios the exercise would throw at them. Kevin never missed a shot when it mattered, and Jake trusted him completely. The exercise began with demonstrations from each alien species. The Vexstar went first, their insectoid forms moving in perfect coordination across the chamber floor. 50 of them spread out in complex patterns, each one knowing exactly where the others would be without any visible communication. They flowed like water around obstacles, reformed into different shapes, and struck targets with precision that came from their hive mind connection. The watching aliens made appreciative sounds as the Vexstar completed their demonstration. Jake had to admit it was impressive. Fighting against an enemy that thought and moved as one unit would be extremely difficult. Next came the Luminari. The energy beings flickered in and out of solid form, passing through walls and barriers like they were made of air. They could become invisible, appear behind enemy positions, and strike before vanishing again. Their demonstration showed them infiltrating a mock enemy base, gathering intelligence, and escaping without being detected. Once, the cyborg collective followed with a display of raw firepower and durability. Their mechanical bodies could absorb damage that would kill any organic being. They carried weapons that fired energy beams hot enough to melt steel. When they moved, servo motors whined and hydraulic systems hissed. They were living tanks, built for war and nothing else. Each demonstration drew cheers and applause from the watching aliens. Jake noticed that many species seemed to be keeping score, comparing the different capabilities and trying to rank who was most impressive. Finally, Admiral Cross announced that it was Earth's turn to demonstrate. Jake stood and walked toward the center of the chamber, his team following behind him. The noise from the observation decks died away as hundreds of alien eyes focused on the three humans. The chamber's systems activated, creating a mock battlefield around them. Buildings rose from the floor, made of the same programmable matter that covered everything else. Streets appeared between the structures, complete with abandoned vehicles and debris. It looked like a war zone, which was exactly what Jake and his team were used to. Human forces will demonstrate urban combat tactics, Admiral Cross announced over the communication system. The scenario involves rescuing hostages from a fortified position while avoiding civilian casualties. Jake signaled to his team. They moved out without a word, each one knowing their role. Amy headed toward the left flank, where she would set up charges to create diversions and breaching points. Kevin found a position on higher ground where he could provide overwatch and precision fire. Jake took the direct approach, moving carefully. From cover to cover as he advanced on the target building, the exercise was going smoothly, until Zexhai decided to interfere. The massive Saurian warrior had been watching from the front row of the observation deck. As Jake paused behind a simulated concrete barrier to assess his next move, Zexhai stood up and activated his communicator. "Stop this pathetic display," his voice boomed through the chamber's speakers. "This is not a demonstration of military capability. This is three mammals playing war games." Jake froze. He could hear murmurs from the watching aliens as they discussed Zexhi's interruption. Admiral Cross's voice came over the communications channel, telling Zexhi to remain silent. During the demonstration, but the damage was already done, Zexhi was not finished. He activated his personal transport system, a device that allowed him to move from the observation deck to the chamber floor in seconds. The platform materialized next to Jake's position with a soft hum. "You call this combat?" Zexhi asked as he stepped off the transport. Up close, he was even more intimidating than Jake had realized. The crystalline armor plates grafted to his scales caught the light and threw it back in sharp flashes. His golden eyes held no warmth, only contempt. Jake straightened, but remained calm. "This is a training exercise. We're following the established protocols." "Protocols," Zexhi repeated, his forked tongue flicking out to taste the air. "Your species loves its rules and procedures. But war is not about following protocols. War is about strength, dominance, and the will to crush your enemies completely." The chamber had gone completely silent. Even the background hum of the ship's system seemed muted. Jake could see Amy and Kevin watching from their positions, waiting for his signal. He could also see Admiral Cross leaning forward in the command booth, her face tight with concern. "In real combat," Zexhi continued, "you would already be dead. Your weak body cannot withstand the forces that true warriors face. Your primitive weapons would be useless against superior technology. Your small brain cannot process the complex strategies needed for modern warfare." Jake felt anger building in his chest, but he kept it under control. Losing his temper now would prove Zexhi's point about human weakness. Instead, he took a step back and prepared to return to his team's demonstration. That was when Zexhi made his fatal mistake. The alien warrior moved faster than Jake expected, his massive hand sweeping around in a backhand slap that caught Jake across the left cheek. The impact was tremendous, powered by muscles that had evolved on a high-gravity world. Jake's head snapped to the side, and he staggered backward 3 steps before catching his balance. The sound of the slap echoed through the chamber like a gunshot. Blood trickled down Jake's face from where Zexhi's claws had broken the skin. For a moment, everything was perfectly still. Then Jake slowly turned back to face the alien warrior. His left cheek was already beginning to swell, and red marks showed where the claws had raked across his skin. But his eyes were steady, calm, and completely focused. "Know your place, mammal," Zexhi hissed, his voice filled with satisfaction. "Your species exists in this federation only because we allow it. You are nothing but primitive animals pretending to be soldiers. In the old days, my kind would have enslaved your entire world." The watching aliens began to stir. Some seemed shocked by Zexhi's behavior. Others appeared to approve, making sounds of agreement. Jake could hear Amy curse under her breath over the communications channel. Kevin's voice was tight with controlled rage as he asked for permission to take action. Jake raised his hand slightly, a signal for his team to hold their positions. His voice when he spoke was barely above a whisper, but somehow it carried clearly through the silent chamber. That was a big mistake. Zexhi laughed, a sound like grinding stone. "Mistake? What are you going to do about it, human? Call for help? Run crying to your admiral? File a complaint with Federation Command?" Jake took one measured step forward. The movement was smooth, controlled, like a predator preparing to strike. "I'm going to teach you something about humans that you should have learned before you decided to touch one of us." "And what is that?" Zexhi asked, his golden eyes gleaming with amusement. Jake's expression was perfectly calm, but there was something in his eyes that made several aliens in the observation deck lean forward nervously. "We're not weak because we're small. We're not primitive because our technology is simple. And we're definitely not harmless because we follow rules." Zexhi's amusement began to fade as he noticed the change in Jake's posture. The human was no longer standing like a soldier at attention. He was balanced on the balls of his feet, his weight distributed evenly, his hands loose at his sides. It was the stance of someone who had spent years learning how to hurt people very efficiently. "You want to know what makes humans dangerous?" Jake continued, his voice still quiet but carrying a chill that made the chamber's air conditioning seem warm. It's not our strength or our speed or our technology. It's the fact that we've been fighting wars against enemies just like us for 10,000 years. We know every trick, every weakness, every way to kill something that thinks exactly like we do. The massive alien warrior suddenly looked less confident. He had expected the human to back down. Zexai moved like a mountain falling. His 8-foot frame lunged forward with deadly intent, crystalline armor plates catching the light as his massive claws reached for Jake's throat. The alien warrior had crushed dozens of enemies with those same claws, and he expected this human to be just another easy victim. He was about to learn why that expectation was wrong. Jake Morrison had been in situations like this before. Not exactly like this, but close enough. He had faced enemies who were bigger, stronger, and better armed than himself more times than he could count. The key was not to fight their strength with strength, but to use their power against them. Time seemed to slow as Zexai's attack began. Jake could see every detail with crystal clarity. The way the alien's weight shifted forward onto his left foot. The slight hesitation as Zexai adjusted his aim. The overconfidence in those golden eyes that said this would be easy. Jake's body moved without conscious thought, muscle memory taking over. 20 years of training kicked in all at once. Every hand-to-hand combat instructor he had ever worked with, every sparring partner who had taught him something new, every real fight where his life had depended on being faster and smarter than his opponent. As Zexai's claws swept toward his neck, Jake dropped low and stepped to his right. The massive alien's momentum carried him forward, his attack missing Jake by inches. But Jake was not trying to avoid the fight. He was positioning himself for what came next. Jake's right hand shot upward in a perfect palm strike. His target was the one spot on Zexai's body that the alien's natural armor did not protect. The soft tissue at the base of the throat, just below where the scales ended and the more flexible skin began. Jake had noticed it during their confrontation the day before. Filing the information away without even thinking about it, the strike landed with devastating precision. Jake's palm hit Zexai's throat with every ounce of force his body could generate. The impact created a sound like a sledgehammer hitting concrete. Zexai's forward momentum suddenly stopped as his airway closed and his nervous system went into shock. But Jake was not finished. As Zexai stumbled backward, gasping for air, Jake's left hand grabbed the alien's weapon harness. The thick straps that held Zexai's equipment in place became Jake's leverage point. He pulled hard, using the alien's own weight and confused movements to throw him further off balance. Zexai tried to recover, his combat training telling him to regain his footing and counterattack. But Jake had already moved to his next position. The human warrior stepped in close, inside the reach of those deadly claws. Where Zexai's size became a disadvantage instead of an asset, Jake's knee drove upward with the force of a pile driver. The target was Zexai's solar plexus, the nerve center just below the chest where even an armored alien would be vulnerable. The knee strike landed perfectly, lifting the 8-foot warrior off his feet and driving the air from his lungs. Zexai's eyes went wide with shock and pain. For the first time in his military career, he was completely helpless. His body would not obey his commands. His lungs could not draw air. His legs could not support his weight. Jake was still not done. Zexai fell backward. Jake grabbed the alien's head with both hands. His fingers found the pressure points on either side of Zexai's skull, spots where the bone was thinner and the blood vessels ran close to the surface. Jake had learned this technique from a martial arts master in Tibet, an old man who could disable opponents twice his size with a touch. Jake squeezed. The pressure he applied was carefully calculated. Not enough to cause permanent damage, but more than enough to disrupt the blood flow to Zexai's brain. The alien's golden eyes rolled back as consciousness left him. His massive body went limp and crashed to the chamber floor with a sound like thunder. Total elapsed time 2 seconds. The combat simulation chamber erupted into chaos. Hundreds of alien voices rose in shock, anger, and disbelief. Weapons were drawn throughout the observation decks as different species reacted to what they had just witnessed. Some demanded Jake's immediate arrest. Others called for medical assistance. For HFY, a few simply stared in stunned silence. Amy Rodriguez was the first to move. She sprinted across the chamber floor, her assault rifle ready, positioning herself to cover Jake's left flank. Kevin Bailey's sniper rifle tracked across the observation decks, looking for immediate threats. The three humans formed a tight defensive triangle around HFY's unconscious form. Admiral Cross's voice boomed over the communication system. "All personnel stand down immediately. Lower your weapons and return to your assigned positions." But the damage was already done. The carefully planned joint training exercise had become a diplomatic incident that would shake the foundations of the Galactic Federation. Jake stood over HFY's motionless body, breathing steadily. His left cheek still bore the marks of the alien's claws, blood trickling down to stain his uniform. But his expression was calm, almost peaceful. He looked like a man who had just completed a routine training drill rather than someone who had just defeated one of the Federation's most feared warriors. Dr. Vexkin, the ship's chief medical officer, rushed onto the chamber floor with a team of medical personnel. The insectoid doctor's multiple arms moved quickly as he scanned HFY's vital signs with handheld devices. "He is alive," Dr. Vexkin announced, his translated voice clicking and buzzing. "Severe concussion, damaged throat tissue, and what you humans would call a knockout, but he will recover." Jake nodded. "Good. I didn't want to hurt him permanently. I just wanted him to understand that size isn't everything." A Saurian officer pushed through the crowd of medical personnel. His scales were darker than HFY's, and old scars marked his armor. This was Commander Sektai, HFY's second-in-command and a veteran of dozens of campaigns. "You," Sektai hissed, pointing a clawed finger at Jake. "You have dishonored a warrior of the Saurian Empire. This insult demands blood." Jake turned to face the new threat, but his posture remained relaxed. "Your warrior dishonored himself when he struck me without provocation. I simply reminded him that actions have consequences." More Saurian soldiers moved toward the chamber floor, their weapons drawn. The tension in the room ratcheted up another notch as other species began choosing sides. The Vexstar seemed to support the humans, making clicking sounds of approval. The Luminari flickered nervously, ready to phase out of physical form if fighting began. The cyborg collective simply observed, their mechanical faces showing no emotion. Admiral Cross stepped onto the chamber floor, flanked by Federation security officers. Her face was grim as she surveyed the situation. "Commander Morrison, you will report to the detention level immediately pending a full investigation." "With respect, Admiral," Jake replied, "I was defending myself against an unprovoked attack. Federation regulations clearly state that any being has the right to use necessary force to protect themselves from assault." "You nearly killed him!" Sektai roared. "No human has the strength to defeat a Saurian warrior in single combat." Jake's expression hardened. "Your friend learned otherwise. And if you want to test the same lesson, you're welcome to try." The chamber fell silent again. Everyone was waiting to see what would happen next. Would Sektai accept Jake's challenge? Would more violence erupt? Would the fragile alliance between Earth and the Federation survive this incident? Amy and Kevin moved closer to Jake, ready to fight their way out if necessary. They had been in worse situations before, though never quite like this one. Surrounded by hostile aliens on a ship in deep space was definitely a new experience, even for seasoned veterans like themselves, but Jake had made his point. He stood calmly in the center of the chaos, blood still dripping from his wounded cheek, showing no fear of the hundreds of alien warriors surrounding him. He had proven something that the Federation had not wanted to believe. Humans were not weak, they were not primitive, and they were definitely not harmless. HFY began to stir, groaning softly as consciousness returned. His golden eyes opened slowly, confusion replacing the arrogance that had been there before. He tried to sit up but fell back as dizziness overwhelmed him. What happened? he whispered, his voice hoarse from the damage to his throat. Dr. Vexkin leaned over him with a medical scanner. You were defeated in single combat by the human. Your injuries are not permanent, but they are quite severe. Zexai's eyes found Jake across the chamber. For a long moment, the two warriors stared at each other. The alien's expression cycled through confusion, anger, and finally something that might have been respect. How? Zexai asked, the single word carrying a wealth of meaning. Jake walked over and knelt beside the fallen warrior. When he spoke, his voice was quiet enough that only Zexai could hear him. Because you fought like someone who had never faced a real challenge before. You relied on size and strength, but you forgot about speed, technique, and experience. In a real fight, those things matter more than how big you are. Zexai nodded slowly. I underestimated your species. Most people do, Jake replied. That's usually their last mistake. As the medical team prepared to move Zexai to the ship's hospital, Jake stood and addressed the watching crowd. His voice carried clearly through the chamber, translated into hundreds of languages. I want everyone here to understand something. The detention cell was small but clean. Jake sat on the narrow bench that served as both chair and bed, staring at the smooth metal walls. He had been locked up for 6 hours now, and he could hear the ship buzzing with activity outside. Footsteps echoed in the corridors as crews of alien beings hurried back and forth, their voices filled with excitement and concern. The door to his cell slid open with a soft hiss. Admiral Cross stepped inside, followed by 2 Federation security officers. Her face looked tired, with deep lines around her eyes that had not been there the day before. Commander Morrison, she said, settling into the chair across from him. Do you have any idea what you've done? Jake looked up at her calmly. I defended myself against an unprovoked attack. Same thing any soldier would do. Any human soldier, maybe, Admiral Cross replied. But you're not on Earth anymore. Jake, you're in a community of hundreds of different species, each with their own ideas about honor, combat, and justice. What you did today has upset the balance we've spent decades building. She activated a small holographic display that showed the ship's communication logs. Messages were flooding in from across the galaxy. Some came from Federation Command, others from individual species governments, and still more from military commanders who wanted to know what had really happened. The Saurian Empire is demanding your immediate execution, Admiral Cross continued. They're saying that attacking Zexai was an act of war against their entire species. 3 other species have joined their call for severe punishment. Jake nodded. And the others? Admiral Cross's expression softened slightly. That's the interesting part. 7 species have sent messages supporting your actions. They're calling Zexai's behavior unacceptable and saying you had every right to defend yourself. The Vexstar delegation sent a formal statement praising your combat skills. Even some of the cyborg collective units are expressing what they call professional admiration for your techniques. She switched the display to show footage from the combat chamber. Jake watched himself defeat Zexai again, the entire fight, lasting only 2 seconds. The hologram showed every detail in slow motion, revealing the precision and control behind what had looked like a simple counterattack. Federation intelligence has been studying this recording for hours, Admiral Cross sighed. They're trying to understand how you moved so fast and struck so precisely. The combat analysts are calling it impossible. It's not impossible, Jake replied. It's just training. Good training, applied correctly? That's exactly what has them worried, Admiral Cross said. If one human can defeat one of the Federation's most feared warriors so easily, what does that say about the rest of your species? The door opened again, and Dr. Helen Martinez entered the cell. She was Earth's chief scientist aboard the Nexus. Prime, a woman who had spent her career studying alien biology and psychology. Her tablet was filled with data from the past 6 hours of research. Jake, she said, settling into a corner of the small room. I've been analyzing the reactions from different species, and the results are fascinating. The incident has divided the Federation into 3 distinct groups. She activated her own display, showing a chart of the galaxy's major species. Group 1 consists of species that have traditionally dominated through physical superiority. The Saurians, the Gorton warriors, the Metal Crushers. They're outraged because you've challenged their entire worldview. To them, the biggest and strongest should always win. The chart shifted, highlighting different species in another color. Group 2 includes species that have survived through cooperation, technology, or specialized abilities. The Vexstar, the Luminari, the Crystal Singers. They're impressed because you showed that intelligence and skill can overcome raw power. And the third group? Jake asked. The undecided, Dr. Martinez replied. Species that are trying to figure out what this means for the Federation's future. They're waiting to see how this situation resolves before choosing sides. Admiral Cross stood and began pacing the small cell. The problem is that this goes beyond just military matters. 3 species have already pulled their trade agreements with Earth. The Saurian Empire has closed their borders to human ships. If this continues, it could destroy everything we've built since joining the Federation. Jake was quiet for a moment, thinking about the implications. When he spoke, his voice was steady. What do they want me to do? Apologize for defending myself? Admit that humans are weak and promise to never fight back again? Some of them, yes, Admiral Cross replied. The Saurian delegation has demanded a public apology and your immediate removal from Federation service. They want you sent back to Earth in disgrace. And if I refuse? Dr. Martinez leaned forward. Then we might be looking at the end of humanity's membership in the Federation. Earth would be cut off from galactic trade, technology, and protection. We'd be back to our own solar system, isolated and alone. The cell fell silent as the 3 humans considered the situation. Jake had always known that his actions could have consequences, but he had never imagined that a single fight could threaten Earth's entire future among the stars. The door opened one more time, and a figure that Jake did not expect stepped inside. It was Commander Sektai, the Saurian officer who had demanded blood after Zexhi's defeat. But now he was alone, without weapons or guards, and his expression was thoughtful rather than angry. Commander Morrison, Sektai said formally, I request permission to speak with you privately. Admiral Cross and Dr. Martinez exchanged glances. Commander, I'm not sure that's appropriate given the current situation. Please, Sektai said. What I have to say may change everything. After a moment's hesitation, Admiral Cross nodded. 5 minutes. We'll be right outside. When the door closed behind them, Sektai sat down across from Jake. Up close, the alien warrior looked older than Jake had first thought. Scars covered his scales, and his armor showed the wear of many battles. I have been a soldier for 47 years, Sektai began. I have fought in 17 major campaigns and countless smaller battles. I have seen warriors from dozens of species, and I thought I understood combat. He paused, his golden eyes studying Jake's face. But I have never seen anything like what you did to Zexhi. That was not luck or accident. That was skill of the highest order. Jake nodded but said nothing. I have watched the recording many times, Sektai continued. I have studied every movement, every technique you used, and I have reached a conclusion that troubles me greatly. What conclusion? That my species has been living a lie, Sektai said quietly. We have conquered worlds through size and strength, yes, but we have never faced enemies who could match our intelligence while exceeding our skill. We have never fought anyone like humans, the alien warrior leaned forward. Tell me honestly, Commander Morrison, how many of your species could do what? You did today? Jake considered the question carefully. Any Navy SEAL could have handled that situation. Most Marines, probably half the soldiers in any Army unit. What I did wasn't special by human standards. It was just basic combat training. Sektai made a sound that might have been laughter, but there was no humor in it. Basic training. You defeated one of our greatest warriors with basic training. I defeated him because he underestimated me, Jake replied. He thought his size and strength were enough. He didn't expect me to be faster, more precise, or better trained. And how many humans have this training? Jake shrugged. Millions, Earth has been at war for most of its history. We've had to develop efficient ways to fight, or we would have destroyed ourselves long ago. Sektai stood and walked to the cells. Small window, looking out at the stars. I came here to demand satisfaction for the insult to my commander. But now I find myself with a different question. What question? How do we prevent humanity from conquering the galaxy? Jake laughed, the sound surprising in the tense atmosphere. Commander, we don't want to conquer anybody. We just want to be left alone to live our lives and explore the universe. But we also won't be pushed around or treated like second-class citizens, even if it means war? Especially if it means war, Jake said seriously. Because that's the one thing humans are better at than anyone else in the galaxy. We've had 10,000 years of practice. Sektai turned back to face him. I believe you. And that terrifies me. The alien warrior moved toward the door, then paused. Commander Morrison, I am going to make a recommendation to the Saurian High Command. I am going to suggest that we withdraw our demands for punishment and instead open negotiations for a formal alliance with Earth. Why? Because after 47 years as a soldier, I have learned to recognize when I am facing a superior enemy, and I would rather have humans as allies than as opponents. As Sektai left the cell, Jake sat back and considered what had just happened. In the span of 2 seconds, he had not only defeated a powerful enemy, but had potentially changed the entire relationship between humanity and the galaxy. The door opened again, and Admiral Cross returned with Dr. Martinez. Their faces showed surprise and hope. Jake, Admiral Cross said, we just received a message from the Saurian High Command. They're withdrawing their demands for your execution and requesting immediate diplomatic talks with Earth. How did you manage that? Dr. Martinez asked. Jake smiled. I told them the truth. 6 months had passed since the incident in the combat simulation chamber. The Federation warship Liberty drifted through space near the outer rim of the galaxy, its hull gleaming with fresh armor plating. Unlike the massive battlecruisers that usually carried Federation forces, the Liberty was built for speed and precision rather than overwhelming firepower. Commander Jake Morrison stood on the bridge, watching the stars wheel slowly past the main view screen. His uniform was different now, bearing the insignia of Federation Special Operations Command. The promotion had come with the new job, along with responsibilities he had never imagined when he first joined the Navy. Sir, Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez called from her station. We're receiving a transmission from Federation Command. They're confirming our mission parameters for the Kepler 7 operation. Jake nodded and moved to the communication console. The holographic display showed Admiral Cross, now serving as Director of Human Federation Relations, along with several alien commanders he had come to know well over the past months. Commander Morrison, Admiral Cross began, the situation on Kepler 7 has deteriorated faster than we anticipated. The rebel forces have taken control of 3 major cities and are threatening to execute Federation civilians if we don't withdraw. Another figure appeared on the display. It was General Vexken, the insectoid commander who had become one of Jake's strongest supporters after witnessing human combat techniques firsthand. The rebels are using tactics we have never encountered before, General Vexken explained, his translated voice clicking and buzzing. They strike quickly, disappear into the civilian population, and reappear somewhere else entirely. Our conventional forces cannot counter their methods. That's why we're sending you, Admiral Cross continued. This is exactly the kind of situation where human tactical thinking gives us an advantage. The rebels expect us to respond with overwhelming force, but your team will do something they won't see coming. Jake studied the mission briefings that appeared on his personal display. Kepler 7 was a mining world with a mixed population of humans and aliens. The rebel group called itself the Liberation Front, and they seemed to be using guerrilla warfare tactics that the Federation military had never encountered before. What kind of support do we have? Jake asked. The best the Federation can provide, Admiral Cross replied. Your team includes specialists from 7 different species. all trained in the new integrated combat methods you've developed. Jake looked around the bridge at his mixed crew. Amy Rodriguez had been promoted to major and now served as his second-in-command. Kevin Bailey, now a lieutenant colonel, ran the sniper training program that had become legendary throughout Federation space. But they were no longer the only humans on the ship. Standing near the tactical display was HFY, the Saurian warrior who had become an unlikely ally. The alien's armor had been modified with human-designed equipment, and he wore the insignia of the Federation Special Operations Corps. His recovery from their fight had been complete, but the experience had changed him in ways that went far beyond physical healing. "Commander Morrison," HFY said, his voice much more respectful than it had been 6 months ago. "My warriors are ready. We have studied the human combat manuals extensively, and we believe we understand the principles you have taught us." Next to him stood Captain Linder, a luminary energy being who had learned to coordinate her phasing abilities with human tactical planning. Her translucent form flickered slightly as she spoke. "The reconnaissance data shows that the rebels have fortified positions throughout the cities," she reported. "But they have not considered the possibility of attacks from multiple dimensions simultaneously." Jake nodded approvingly. The integration of human tactics with alien abilities had produced results that exceeded everyone's expectations. What had started as a simple training exercise had evolved into an entirely new form of warfare. "Remember," Jake addressed his team, "we're not going to Kepler 7 to show off or prove how tough we are. We're going there to save lives and restore peace. The rebels are using fear and violence to control the population. Our job is to show them that there's a better way." The Liberty dropped out of hyperspace near Kepler 7, its arrival timed to coincide with the planet's night cycle. Jake's team moved quickly to their assault shuttles, each craft carrying a mixed crew of humans and aliens working together with practiced efficiency. The first phase of the operation went exactly as planned. Kevin Bailey's sniper teams, now including Saurian warriors with enhanced targeting systems, took out the rebel communication centers with precision strikes. Linder's Luminar units phased through the rebels' defenses to gather intelligence and disable their heavy weapons. But it was the second phase that truly demonstrated how much the Federation had changed. Instead of storming the rebel positions with overwhelming force, Jake's teams did something unexpected. They surrounded the enemy strongholds and began broadcasting messages to the civilian populations trapped inside. "This is Commander Morrison of the Federation Special Operations Corps." Jake's voice echoed through the streets of the occupied cities. "We know you're scared, and we know you've been told that the Federation doesn't care about your lives. But we're here to prove that's wrong." The rebels responded with threats and ultimatums, demanding that the Federation forces withdraw or face the consequences. But Jake had learned something important about dealing with bullies over the past 6 months. "We're not here to fight you," he broadcast back. "We're here to give you a choice. You can surrender peacefully and face trial for your crimes, or you can continue this path and face the consequences of your actions. But either way, you will not harm any more innocent people." The standoff lasted for 3 hours. During that time, Jake's teams demonstrated their capabilities in ways that left no doubt about the outcome. Saurian warriors disabled the rebels' vehicles with surgical precision. Vexstar units swarmed through the rebels' defensive positions, mapping every weakness and escape route. Luminary scouts gathered intelligence on every rebel position, while remaining completely invisible, but it was the humans who provided the element that broke the rebels' will to fight. Amy Rodriguez led a team of combat engineers, who began constructing siege equipment in full view of the rebel positions. Not modern energy weapons or high-tech devices, but simple, effective tools that had been used in human warfare for thousands of years. Catapults, siege towers, and battering rams built from local materials. "What are they doing?" One of the rebel commanders was heard asking over intercepted communications. "They're showing us that they don't need advanced technology to defeat us," another voice replied. "They're telling us that they can take our positions with sticks and stones if they have to." The psychological impact was devastating. The rebels had expected to face a technologically superior enemy that they could outsmart and outmaneuver. Instead, they found themselves facing opponents who were prepared to fight at any level of technology, using any tactics necessary to achieve their goals. The surrender came just before dawn. One by one, the rebel commanders emerged from their positions with white flags, their weapons abandoned. The civilians who had been held hostage were released unharmed, and the occupation of Kepler 7 ended without a single shot being fired. Jake stood in the main square of the planet's capital city, watching as Federation peacekeepers processed the surrendering rebels. His mixed team of humans and aliens worked together with an efficiency that would have been impossible just 6 months ago. HFY approached, his massive form moving with the careful precision that had become his trademark since learning human combat techniques. "Commander," the Saurian warrior said, "I have a question that has been troubling me." "What's that?" "6 months ago, you defeated me in single combat in 2 seconds. Today you defeated an entire rebel army without firing a shot, which victory required more skill." Jake considered the question carefully. The first one required training and reflexes. The second one required understanding and patience. Both are important, but only one of them builds a better future. And which one is that? The one that ends with former enemies becoming allies. Jake replied, looking at the mixed crew of humans and aliens working together around them. As the Liberty prepared to depart Kepler 7, Jake received a message from Federation Command. The success of the operation had convinced the remaining holdout species to accept the new integrated military structure. Humanity's role as tactical advisors and trainers was now officially recognized throughout the galaxy, but for Jake, the real victory was simpler. He watched as HFY worked alongside Amy Rodriguez to coordinate the final evacuation procedures. He saw Kevin Bailey teaching a group of young Luminari recruits the fundamentals of precision shooting. He observed dozens of species working together, learning from each other, becoming stronger as a unit than any of them could be alone. The incident that had started with a slap and ended with a 2-second fight had grown into something much larger. It had become proof that differences in strength, size, and technology mattered less than the willingness to learn, adapt, and work together. As the Liberty jumped back into hyperspace, heading toward their next mission, Jake allowed himself a moment of satisfaction.